2025 season is upon us, with the McLaren boys Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri taking the season by storm so far. And taking the VR community by storm is this, the incredible Pimax Super. So EA and Codemasters, like previous seasons, have launched F1 2025, and it comes with a native VR mode. But what's it like on Pimax's premium VR headsets? Absolutely incredible. Now last year I played F1 2024 on this, the Quest 3. And let's just say after a couple of sessions it was quickly forgotten, the visuals were blurry and the gameplay pretty linear. Great on the ultra-wide monitor, but not in VR. So as you may have already guessed, F1 2025 is a different story altogether. So get ready for some fast-paced, high-octane, adrenaline-fueled VR action right after this. And thanks to the fantastic team at Pimax, you can grab yourself an exclusive discount off the Pimax Super, including an incredible $200 discount to Pimax Crystal Light owners who are looking to upgrade. Full details are in the link below.
You're looking at the jams right now. We turning up the amps right now. Yeah, looking at the jams right now. Y'all know we can stand that ground. You've been looking at the jams. That's the ad.
So this is F1 2025 and this is on the Pimax Super, and guys, the game is absolutely visually stunning. The game looks fantastic and it also plays fantastic too, I'm pleased to say. Now this video is a little bit late in the making because I've had to play around with settings to get this game working well. I didn't want to release a video without really playing around and making sure that it ran well, because initially out of the box, although the game runs fine on the actual in-game high settings, the Pimax Super is a tremendously demanding device. And now I'm running an RTX 5090 and an Intel Core Ultra 285K, and the game is hitting a constant 90 FPS at 90Hz mode on the Pimax Super. So in addition to this, on the actual Steam VR settings, we've had to drop the render resolution down to 90%, which gives it a resolution per eye of 4440 x 4468, which is still an incredibly high render resolution, and once again it looks absolutely fantastic in the headset. On the actual Pimax Play side of things, we had to drop it down to medium settings, which is set at 75% render resolution. Now back to the actual Steam VR settings, so we've had to disable a couple of features in there again, so the advanced super sample filtering needs to be turned off as well. Now with those settings changed, the actual in-game jitter is practically reduced to 0, so it makes the game incredibly playable and incredibly enjoyable to play. Now I'm used to playing driving simulations like iRacing, so it does feel quite arcadey to me, but the overall experience is really enjoyable. If I was to place it into another Steam VR title, I would say the experience feels a lot like Automobilista 2. Now that in itself is no bad comment, because Automobilista 2 is an absolutely fantastic title. But there is something really good about F1 2025, and it just feels really electric to play, which is not a bad thing. So the actual in-game reflections are really nice, the actual textures are really good, the detail is very, very good, and we can actually also change it onto an ultra-high setting for VR if we wish to within the game, but the actual high setting plays very, very nice. I can't see a tremendous difference between the high and the ultra settings within the game. Now, my normal preferred way of actually showing you a game is to actually have me sat in the bottom left corner, so you can actually see me within the game itself as I'm actually recording this, and I would normally narrate over that. But the game is actually quite demanding even on the 5090, and I found that with OBS running, it actually caused an encoder overload, so it was very, very difficult to actually run a 4K camera and actually capture it over OBS at the same time. So the best I can do, unfortunately, was to actually capture an in-game session, and this is the Chinese Grand Prix, as said, playing as Lando Norris here, and it once again, it took a number of attempts to try and get this film just right. Now, I found actually if we captured the actual monitor view and we actually recorded it using that, there was a really stretched out appearance and it just didn't give it the level of quality that it deserves. Now, of course, it's very difficult. We just can't show you how it appears in the actual Pimax Super, unfortunately, but the experience visually is far better than what you're seeing on screen here. So this is recorded in 4K. So what you are seeing here is an actual 4K rendition of the actual VR or Steam VR capture using the plugin within OBS. On the subject of the Pimax Super, so one thing that is really amazing me with the Pimax Super over other VR headsets that I've utilised is the actual tracking in the Pimax Super. Whatever wizardry Pimax have done under the skin with the Super is working clearly. So I'll bring up on screen just now so you can see what I would normally use. It's a Devoom box and it actually has a QR code. It gives the VR headset something to focus on to avoid the studio lighting and everything else that's going on around the outside view. Now, with the Pimax Super, I haven't even needed to actually have that on. The actual inside out and tracking on the Pimax Super has been absolutely fantastic. Now, for VR games of a racing type, that is an incredibly valuable thing. So another thing that sets the Pimax Super apart in terms of racing titles especially is the actual field of view being so good. From the corner peripheral view of the eye, you can literally see the cars just coming from the corner of your eye just as they're about to overtake before you probably potentially even notice them in your mirrors. So once again, that's a really great perception enhancement feature, and it just makes for the overall experience just being really exciting. Now, in the actual game itself, the level of detail is very good, so you might notice just then as I went over the grass, you'll see that they do gather the detail on the actual tyres themselves, and then that obviously dissipates as you then carry on the tarmac still. So there have been a number of changes within the game itself. So we have a new My Team 2.0 as Codemasters calls it, which is said to be a much more realistic version of the management engine or the role-playing game engine of F1 25. In this version, however, I'm playing in the actual career mode, so I'm playing as a real driver. So driving here today is Lando Norris, who I have to say is doing tremendously well in F1 25 for real this year so far. So you can also jump online, you can race against various standards of opposition, you can go onto individual tracks or play split screen against a friend. There's a new mode called Career Challenge, and it lets you play some scenarios offline. You can then post them to a global leaderboard as well. So there's lots of different value within the game in terms of content, and again, it's a really enjoyable game overall. It certainly feels a lot better than previous iterations, and as mentioned on the Pimax Super, the game just feels absolutely electric, and it really is absolutely fantastic. So a great way of trying F1 2025 for 5 hours for free if you sign up to Xbox Game Pass. Most PC gamers are already a member of Game Pass, and then you download the EA Play application. You can get a 5-hour trial of the full version of the game, and you can give it a whirl in VR and see what you think of it. So another thing I found, that the actual force feedback in the game was a little bit lackluster. I did try playing around with it on the Moza R5 base. I also have the Moza GS wheel that goes with that, and I tweaked it in game and tried tweaking it in Moza Pithouse, but just found it was a little bit all or nothing really. So in terms of a detraction from the overall realistic feel of the game, that was just one negative that I found with it. But that's something that's quite easily rectified by either Codemasters or EA if we wish to change that in their future updates. So there's a few additional nice features as well in F1 25. So they've also made some reverse tracks of some of the more popular tracks like Silverstone and the Red Bull Ring. So there's 3 tracks in total. There's also Zandvoort as well, and you can race down those in the wrong direction. They've actually remodeled the pit lane and signage to actually make it look a lot more realistic, and some of those are actually really enjoyable to race around in a different direction as well. So it just adds a new dimension to the game. So overall, I've really enjoyed F1 2025. It's been an absolutely fantastic experience on the Pimax Super. But out of the box, like with many VR titles, it requires a little bit of work. So I'm going to go through and share with you the settings that I've used on F1 2025. The experience on your PC may obviously vary, so here are my PC specifications. I'm using an Intel Core Ultra 9285K and an RTX 5090 with 48GB of CU DIMM RAM. Now, onto the in-game settings. So the in-game settings are fairly easy. It will actually work on the high settings. However, I've made a slight customization in order to optimize the jitter within game. So first of all, change the setting to custom. You go down to set the parameters as you can see here. The shadow quality to medium, the crowd to medium, the car and helmet reflections to medium, and set the skid marks down to low. And then further down, we can see that we have the screen space reflections set to off, and then the texture streaming to medium, and then the rest of the settings as you can see here. So one of the main problems that people have with F1 25, as you may have read, is there is a screen tearing or a jitter, and that can be circumvented by adjusting the settings accordingly. So you can see here the in-pit view. You will still have jittering in the in-pit view, but we can mitigate those issues by actually going into Pimax Play, and then we move on to the actual device settings. In games, we need to select the render quality to medium, disable all foveated rendering, turn off the hidden area mask, and select 90Hz mode. If we then launch the game, go into in-game settings and go to the VR settings, you'll see that Pimax Super appears in there at the super high resolution, and the refresh rate will be set to 90Hz. So you need to select override Steam VR scaling values and select the scale value and reduce that down to around 90%. Once again, you may want to play around with these values. Once you've changed those values, you then need to simply save and exit. We then need to go into the Steam VR settings. When in Steam VR settings, you select Advanced Settings and Show from the bottom left-hand corner. And once you've gone back into the main section, you will see in the center we have the render resolution. Change that from auto to custom and change the resolution per eye to 90%. Underneath that we have Advanced Super Sample Filtering. We need to change that from on to off. And then once we return into the game and go into VR settings, you'll then see that the resolution has now changed to a lower resolution. Now once again, you can play around with those factors, but again that will be really determined by your individual PC and your individual specification as to how well you can get the game to run. Now I mentioned earlier in the video that I had some issues with OBS and overloading on encoding. Now you can see in this section here that I normally would actually record the video with an overlay like this. However, the actual overloading encoder issues apparently relate to issues with OBS and the 50 series GPU drivers at the moment, so hopefully that's something that will be rectified fairly soon. And in the next video I'm certainly hoping we can go back to this format of recording. As always, thank you for watching. There are some links here to some other videos you may find of interest. Join me on X at NextLevelSim and Discord at the link in the video description. And in the next video, we'll be taking a look at more amazing Pimax Super goodness. It costs absolutely nothing to like, share and subscribe. Until next time, take care and I'll see you again soon.